Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Today's Business Leaders. I am really excited to have my good friend Nathan Brooks on here today. The main reason why I started this show like 7 years ago is because I felt like there wasn't enough authenticity out there about what the entrepreneurial journey is about from people that are actually living it, actually have payroll and employees and like things like that. We all know there's plenty of noise online about how easy and simple and it is to get rich fast as an entrepreneur with, no problems. I see too much of that content still today, but Nathan is the real deal. Him and I connected a few years ago and have hung out online for quite a while. And I've just watched him grow his company Bridge into multiple different business units, as well as he's worked on a lot of other things. Nathan, you are somebody that I admire and respect. You show up consistently with principle-based messaging and just with the truth of what entrepreneurship is like. So I'm really grateful to have you here today.
Wow. Well, that was a really kind thing to say. And I feel the same thing about yours, frankly. And boy, it's funny what you just said as far as the people out there talking about how easy and simple it is. Just as a matter of fact, this week, I've had two or three different conversations about just that, whether it's adding a zero or growing a business or, and I think there's a wide gap between the reality of the work and the time and all the challenges that come with what people, that 20 years to, overnight success situation.
It only took me about 22.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really excited to get into this, and we're going to definitely dive deep on that topic and anything that you want to share, because everything you share and post is valuable, Nathan, and truly from the heart and authentic about how you show up as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a father and husband. I always love reading your stuff, but we're going to get up to current day here in a minute. But to start, when did you first realize that you were an entrepreneur?
I was probably 6 or 8 or however old you could be to mow lawns in the neighborhood. I distinctly remember buying my own lawnmower a few years later, having my parents driving me around, and we had a Ford Taurus. And so it's such a great one for, moving a lawnmower around. And so I distinctly remember them driving me and me doing these lawns. And eventually I bought a riding mower, and it had a little thing I could pull behind to put the mower and the weed eater in. And so I, from an early age and all the way through high school, doing that kind of stuff, as well as, then in college, helping running bars and stuff like that. So playing music. So since I was a kid.
Yeah, it's interesting you share about doing lawn mowing and landscaping stuff, because a couple years ago, my team and I went pretty deep in the landscaping niche to decide if we were going to really heavily target that
Mm.
space. It's a really interesting industry because the vast majority of the successful landscaping companies all started the way you did, as kids with a push
Mm.
mower or the tractor and the trailer, so they didn't have to get driven around. Some of those guys have multi-million dollar landscaping companies now. It's a really organic entrepreneurial path for sure.
That's wild. And it makes sense too, because you have an established base. If you're, 12, 13, 14, 15, all of a sudden you got 20 yards in the neighborhood, and all of a sudden you're 16, you can drive and you can expand, you can hire your buddy. And if you're efficient and you show up and I love like getting the lines right in the yard, and, plus it's a heck of a way to learn business connections, relationships, and all that.
Yeah. And what's fascinating to me about that industry specifically is that it's such a low barrier to entry. And that's a huge thing in the entrepreneurial journey I've had, and just with the thousands of people I've coached entrepreneurial now over the years. Um, when there's low barrier to entry, there's perceived ease of success, is
Mm.
my take on it. But in reality, the guys that started that way and grew up to be larger entrepreneurs like you, or even just running a much larger landscaping company, they've had to go through the full education. There's nothing easy. You still have to learn customer service and good delivery and finance and collections and marketing and the whole 9 yards. There's no shortcutting learning the entrepreneurial skill set. And I've only recently in the last few years started to codify like 125 key skills that you have to learn as an entrepreneur. I'm working, it's a bigger project that I'll come out with soon. But I always preach against the people that say you're only one funnel away, or you only need these three things in business to be successful, or this one formula or framework is all you need. And I mean, that is like the fastest red flag for me when I see somebody advertising that says this is the only thing. I'm like, well, clearly you've never really been in business.
100%. And it's funny you mentioned that because for the last probably 18 months that I have been really thinking about, or 12 months, I have this sitting right here. It's the copywriter's handbook, and it's writing. And
Yeah.
like what you just said, it's a clickbait a thing, but it's also baseless. So
Yes.
just because you have a great title doesn't mean you have a great implementation of that. So yeah, I feel that in my bones.
As you started, I was curious, like, what do you, obviously very entrepreneurial from same age as me, as when I was young, there was some pretty specific things that drove that behavior. What do you think were the drivers behind you doing that? Obviously, you took the right action and learned to be an entrepreneur, and you've stuck with it to this point. What do you think are, like, were there any core drivers at that age, or was it just very internal and intrinsic?
I think that I was motivated to just be my own man kind of thing, which of course, as an entrepreneur who actually runs businesses that actually work, very well that nobody's there. It requires lots of great people. So let me
Yeah.
be very clear that I'm not suggesting that. By far the opposite. I know that I was driven to make money. I wanted to be able to, you know, take a girl on a nice date, or buy a car. I've always enjoyed cars, so I think that there was definitely money drive. And I would say as I've gotten older, I think it's easier to be successful when you're more motivated by creating something really awesome,
Yeah.
and instead of just being like, oh well, that's the fastest path to make $1 million or whatever, versus like, oh, we're going to go make a huge impact on this really cool problem, and it's going to be a huge pain in the ass, and we're going to spend a lot more time and a lot more money and a lot more pain and all the things, but at the end you're like, wait, but we did it. Yeah, so I think that's the fun part of watching that journey. And kind of back to your question too, which I spent more than 10 years of my life as a professional musician. So from age, for fifth grade on through college and beyond, I played, music. And whatever point I became a quote unquote professional, I played music professionally for more than a decade. And so I think that really helped my entrepreneurial journey too, because you're writing about what your music is, you're writing music, you're dedicating that time to your craft and playing, and then getting people to a show. So how do you
Yeah.
market that? How do you get people to show up in butts and seats and manage all that kind of stuff? So I think there's a lot of cool parts of that where I wouldn't have said, oh yeah, the guy that's a musician that has a bachelor of arts in humanities owns real estate businesses and lending businesses and stuff, but it worked out that way.
Yeah. I did not. I wouldn't classify myself as professional in the music space, but I definitely played in a lot of bands and got to open for some bigger acts and did that stuff. And then because I was so money motivated, I walked away from it. I was like, how am I going to ever make money at this? And I don't like the direction my friends are going with the crowd and the life they have. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
expect that I would get sucked into anything, which I never did. Thank God. I don't know why in some senses, but a lot of that space felt like empty to me on one hand, and then on the other hand, I was like, how am I going to reach my financial goals? Because for me, younger too, was definitely super financially motivated because I grew up with nothing. And so I definitely started out with the same thing of how much money can I make, which is, I think, a totally normal entry into entrepreneurship. But then over the years, I realized that's money is just the byproduct of the impact and the value I create. And now
Yep.
I know how to focus on value, and making money is really easy.
It becomes a totally different problem.
Yeah.
And I love what you said. And, I think there's variations of the ease of the money part, but
Yeah.
it also functions around, like you said, the impact that it's making. And also, I got a really sweet message today from one of the people on our real estate agent team. And she said something like, you know, I don't know if people tell you this, but you're a really great motivator, which I normally would never talk about myself in that way anyway. But, it was a sweet message to receive, but it was also like a light bulb moment that said, this is what the impact is actually about, right? Like this is what we're actually doing that for. This is what the actual leadership responsibility is for, that your people feel loved and they actually have a place that they like being around the people and the culture that you create and the values of what that is. If you don't know what it is, it's really hard to explain and it's hard to attract people who want to be a part of that thing.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge part because it's like the longer I've been in business, the more I realize exactly that is like paying top dollar is not necessarily going to attract the right talent. Like obviously you want to be competitive, but as I've, you know, become more financially intelligent and run more sophisticated financial models as a company, we've made the choice to target paying 80-85% of what the market pays, like of the average out there for the roles we have, because we know our culture is so strong and people show up for the culture and they enjoy the pay, like is the reality of where everybody works. Because I know plenty of people are making great six-figure jobs and it was hell and they left. Like, so it's clearly not just about the money. And so you're totally right that the culture we create, how people feel, knowing that they're making a positive impact in solving problems is significantly more motivating than the money. And then obviously the money needs to be enough that they don't think about it or worry about it, but it's without question not the only factor.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that I started to have a realization about was what are their individual goals? And so if we start with their individual goals and understanding where does that fit in alignment with our company values and our company goals, and can I help that person accomplish it? So, if it requires them to make a lot more money to go buy a lake house, then it's like, cool, how can we set you up in a way where you're in positions to have that responsibility, you're in positions to have that opportunity to make that much money, and also you have that level of ownership and responsibility in the first place, which takes time to build that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I'll say, and then I want to ask you a little bit more about your journey, is I finally realized, fortunately, it's been a little while now, almost 10 years ago, that the way to increase income is just to increase my personal value.
Mm-hmm.
And the amazing thing is when you're an entrepreneur and you're leading a company, the more you invest in yourself, the more you level up your leadership skills, your practical commercial skills, the more knowledge you have. Not only does that elevate yourself, which needs to happen, so you have more earning potential personally, raises the standard for your team, and all of that trickles down and that flows into your culture, and everybody understands how to be a person of value. And being a person of value means you'll never have to worry about money, compared to, at least we all will have financial challenges and strain at times, but comparatively, there's no ultimate loss. I'm confident I would venture to say that you're probably in the same place, that like if my for some reason my business disappeared today, in like 60, 90 days I would be almost in the same position, because all of the value I bring is intrinsic, it's internal, it's who I am, who I know, what I do. And I do know, which is I'm incredibly grateful and honored to be able to say, that if the company closed today, I guarantee you that at least half, if not two-thirds of my staff would say, hey, just let me know as soon as you're ready. Or can we work for you for free for a little bit to help you? Which is mind blowing. Like they've said things to be like that in tough seasons, or like when we hit COVID, I had almost like 6, 7 team members say, hey, can we just loan the company money? And fortunately, COVID ended up amazing for us. We had a very short, tight, weird period, like I think a lot of people did.
It was
Um,
weird and
but
short,
yeah,
and then gangbusters.
yeah, exactly. Just wild. But then to be able I was just blown away that my team was so dedicated to who we are as a company, that they, said, well, hey, I'd rather loan the company money because I believe in it this much, which is, I'll never forget the people that said that to me. In that moment, I was like, holy shit. So,
Yeah, that's insane, man, and that just goes to the value you bring and also the relationships that you've created. And I think that at the end of the day, I tell my people all the time that I really don't want to have relationships where I don't have a desire of having a deeper relationship than just somebody that's on a payroll.
right.
And I tell people when I have first interviews with them too, I'm just like, hey, just so you know, this is part of our culture. This is part of who we are in the DNA. And so if that's weird for you and you don't like it, then it's definitely not the place for you. But if you
Yeah.
want a home and a family away from your family that you actually care about and cares about you and has your best interest in mind, then this is a great place for you.
Yeah. Culture beats everything.
It does. It does. And, it's unbelievable when I sit down and meet with people And they're like, my last job, I felt like I was a cog in a wheel or whatever. And I actually changed my response to this recently, which was, well, you're still a cog in a wheel because we all have a responsibility, but
Yeah.
it's how do we actually engage beyond the responsibility that we hold, which you don't have a job if you don't hold that responsibility, right? So either way, we all are a cog in whatever machine we're a part of. It's just a matter of our accountability and responsibility and um, how we actually do it.
I know you shared a little about being in the music industry. When did you start getting into real estate?
So I distinctly remember when Robert Kiyosaki was like really big all of a sudden, and all the ads on radio at the time, and so it's early 2000s. And so I went to one of their, I read the book, and I went to one of their events that was, $100 or whatever it was. And of course now I realize it's, their ascension model of all the, coaching and sales, but I was oblivious to that at the
Yeah.
moment. And so, I went like 2 levels through that. And then I was sitting in a restaurant and overheard a guy say, like, I'm in real estate and I'm flipping blah, blah, blah. And of course, like any idiot who thinks that they can just jump into whatever I did, I stand up, I'll go walk over, and 3 weeks later, I'm in business with this guy. And which you can imagine it went about as well as that sounds. But that was my foray start into real estate.
Yeah. What were the big lessons from that first experience? Because I was in real estate for a little while too, and with a great partner, but I learned a bunch of hard lessons. I'm curious what you learned early on, because as with any entrepreneurial path, one, we're conditioned to think things are easy, and then two, there's plenty of people that just advertise, oh, it's easy, do this, the simple thing, it's this path, and you'll make passive income if you just do this little thing. What did you actually learn in your early experiences?
Well, I mean, I got my teeth kicked in. So this guy was going through a divorce, and he stopped showing up, and he was supposed to be the construction guy, and I was the quote unquote money guy, even though I didn't really have any money. And I was starting to hire guys from the day labor place down the street, how to design it and what do you do. And I all of a sudden I have a tool belt, and I'm buying tools at Home Depot and running, and I learned so many things, which is having the right people in the right seat. And I have a saying now, which is what iteration of leadership I'm at. And I feel like I'm all of a sudden at an iteration where I have just like the baby skills now of what it really is to be a great leader. And I think early on, it's, oh, well, I'll go through the tool belt on. And then it's like, oh, well, I'm trying to hire people to help, but I really don't know how to do it. And I'm not a good leader. And I'm kind of a jerk. And I don't have clear roles and responsibilities for people. And, or if I don't have that, I'm not clear up front with
Yeah.
what you're walking into. And then, we grew a turnkey company that, flipped 700 houses in, 6, 7 years. So, and then the learning of that, and we didn't pay close enough I didn't pay close enough attention to our margin and to what our staffing was and those kind of things. And so now rolling into new companies, it's more like, okay, I'm very aware of our profit margin, and I'm very aware of what is our path to marketing and our path to sales and our path to operations and our path to finance, and really making sure we define what those things are.
Yeah, there's a lot in what you just said I can relate to, because you sound very similar to me, of like, when I decide to do something, I just jump in and figure it out, which there's a lot of value to being an action, first type of person. There's this entrepreneurial personality test I took a couple times over the years called the Colby Index, and
Sure.
I don't remember the rest of it. All I know is I'm a high quick start, and then everything else doesn't matter to me. Which it does matter, but like I always just remember that part of taking it that says like your bias is towards action, which is absolutely key as an entrepreneur, right? But what I didn't realize early on is I would just take action and worry about details later. And I think that mature entrepreneurship is having adequate, effective planning, strategy, research, and diving in at the right time. You're never going to have a perfect plan. You're never going to have 100%, strategy, but putting some of that in place brings that awareness of like, what do the numbers look like? What does finance look like? Who's going to do what? Like having real self-awareness of what bandwidth and focus we can push through ourselves. Because the other thing from the entrepreneurial view standpoint is like, we're incredibly optimistic, and for me at least, definitely to a fault. is where
Yes.
I've been in the past. And now I need to be a realistic optimist as compared to like, oh, it'll work out. I'll just work hard enough, which there's a lot of merit in hard work without question. You cannot succeed without a ton of hard work. But then somewhere in the journey, we have to start working smart too and thinking through and being self-aware enough to realize what you just said of like, I'm not good at this. To realize that, or just to have that conversation with yourself and with those close to you, then you actually have the opportunity to grow and succeed more, right?
100%. And I think the other component of what you were saying is from the leadership standpoint, getting and doing the work, yes. But, and then also the recognition of, I remember how many people do we know who are like, well, I'm just a visionary. I'm just a visionary. I have the ideas, like, and I need a partner. And I'm like, that is just an absolute recipe for disaster and pain. And that iteration of leadership too, even in those turnkey days, I definitely had that feeling, or I had that self-talk. It was like, I'm visionary, I don't, and now it's like, no, I have to know enough about it. I
Yeah.
have to know what the tracking is. I have to know how our team's holding that responsibility, because if you sit in the CEO seat of that business, then that is your job to know the baseline fundamentals of your business. You don't have to manage it, but you better
Right.
know it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's this kind of societal myth, definitely in the United States, that specialization is the ultimate achievement. Well, that's probably some truth to that in the employee position, where the more you specialize, theoretically, you probably have more upside, more opportunity. Entrepreneurs have to be really strong generalists, is what I just heard you say, because if I don't have the general understanding and couldn't at least hack my way through one of my team members' job roles, it can never perform at the level my team does. They're amazing. If I can't even like perform the basics functions or at least know what it's supposed to look like, then I don't have enough general knowledge to lead or ask the right questions. And the only way I know how to get strong as a generalist is to put in the time and do the hours and do the research and try at things that I'm not good at.
Yes, I agree. And like, so fundamentally in like the finance department, I'm atrocious. And it's a really a low, both low enjoyment and low skill set for me. But
Yeah.
I realized, like, for instance, I have a private banker. So every Monday she sends me an email with all my bank balances. Like,
Yeah.
we track all of the closings on a very simple spreadsheet for our retail team. We have a tracking daily set up on our lending company, so we know how many calls did you make and how many loans did you place. All of a sudden, you're like, okay, well, why don't I build a system that actually delivers the information? Well, I think you even alluded to this point. Like, what is the question?
Right.
What are those 3, 4, 5, 10 pieces of data that are critically important that we know, and then how do we drive that to our team so that they know, and then who's responsible for that thing and why are they responsible and why do I need to know it?
Yeah. I remember being, I think I was like 16 or 17 years old. I was selling my first website. The first one I sold to somebody for decent money was a few $1,000. So I was pretty happy about that. And this guy owned a custom extrusion manufacturing plant. So they did custom plastic extrusion. He said to me, if you don't know minute by minute what you're producing, if you don't know your numbers at the hourly level, then you can't be successful in business. And he told me that at 16. I remember when I was 23 or 24, when I was going bankrupt and losing my construction company because I didn't understand my numbers was the main
Mm.
driver. I had some people stick me for some pretty big payments, which was a big domino effect. But I remember having that conversation from a handful of years later and going, I understand what he means now. I went bankrupt for $1 million and it was some of the best education I've ever had in my life. But you're exactly right. Like, if you don't even know the questions to ask, then that's a huge deficit. But if you know the right questions to ask and you ignore that, then you're definitely setting yourself up for bigger failures. And because of that guy's advice, after I lost my first business, I used to get daily numbers on everything.
Mm.
Like, how much should I collect? What's in the bank? How many calls do we make? Now, because I have great leaders, I look at numbers once a week and I can look at them anytime I want. But it's amazing to me how many businesses have no idea what their numbers are, and then they wonder why they can't grow or why they get to tax time and they're surprised with their tax bill or they didn't make any money. It's like the financial intelligence aspect of being an entrepreneur is so important, and so it's not talked about enough at all, in my opinion.
I could not agree more. And I'm thankful for Gary Harper and his business chart. He has a bunch of businesses now. We had business coaching, and for many years we spent $50,000 to $100,000 a year on coaching. And I think that there's a lot of buzz for coaches for everything. Back to like our original conversation and get rich quick, but a real business coach and a real life coach, I have a therapist, I have a coach, I have athletic coaches in my life, because those are the things that help make me a better person, help make me be a better leader, help me be a better entrepreneur. So you got to get the right ones to help you actually know what the things are that you need to do.
Yeah, and that's like we were talking early on about, like, there's so much noise and there's so many people faking it. I used to be very judgmental about that. I'm definitely more at a place where I just have the awareness that that's where they're at in their entrepreneurial journey, and they don't understand, because I did a lot of stupid things that I regret and wouldn't do again. But when it's come to like finding the right coaches and the right, guidance, what kind of pitfalls have you fallen into, and what, now having learned those lessons, you obviously have great people around you. What are the pitfalls, and what are the things that you now look for when you're doing due diligence, or where you're saying, like, I'm going to actually go with this person and spend a bunch of time, let alone the money, right, of using them as a resource.
Well, I've learned it both as a coach and as being coached. And so I think alignment of what the actual end result is and defining it really, really clearly at the beginning.
Hmm.
And that to me has caused some chaos for me, both as someone who's being coached as well as coaching. I think that's critically important. And then I also think somebody who, for me personally, can actually relate to the problem, and they're not just, trying to teach you concepts, but they've already done that. They've solved those actual problems. There's a big difference between somebody who solved those problems and can communicate how to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
And so I think to me it's really having a longer. Well, I'm a ready, fire, aim guy, like you said. You're a quick start guy, so see the thing, click, bought, done. Instead of like, okay, hold on, it's okay to slow down. Let's ask some questions.
Yeah.
Let's maybe think about for ourselves, what is my end goal? What's my next step? And so that's really been helpful when I use it, which I'm still not perfect at, but to slow down and say, okay, cool. What's the end result? Tell me how you would work through this. Like, what are some objectives that we set? What is it like to work with you? How often do we interact? How do you like to interact? How do I like to interact? And start to really think about, for instance, there's certain ways I don't love taking phone calls, but I'd
Mhm.
much rather get a text message and we solve it, and then otherwise let's meet in person and I have an actual connection. So really defining those kind of things has dramatically made those things work better for me.
Yeah, I love like what you share there, because the detail of questions that we ask, in order to have detailed questions, like you said, you really need to sit with yourself and start thinking, what's the outcome that I want, which is sounds like the most simple question, but I forget to ask myself that question all the time, and then I get into this engagement at whatever level, even just having more exploratory calls or kicking around a concept. And those times I realize I'm 3 or 4 meetings in, and I'm like, do I even want to do this, or do I even know what I'm trying to do? Because that quick start entrepreneurial mentality is like, I'm excited about this, let's do it, and without a lot of thought, and really contemplating things. But if
The other the other thing that's worked really
yeah.
well, and I learned this the hard way too, and I continue to in some ways, but a lot less so, thankfully. But is I had a partner, well, I still have a partner who said to me, he's like, "Hey, you can talk me into anything, you can get me excited about anything, but what I'm realizing is just because you talk us into doing it, and I don't have the physical capabilities to like get you off a ledge of this thing that we want to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this ideas parking lot, which was a Google Doc at the time. And when we have an idea, we're going to put it in the ideas parking lot, and we're going to come back to it. We're going to see if it has a life next week and it has a life the week after. And if you, Nathan, keep harassing me about it, and we keep talking about it, and that, hey, the idea is a little better, and the idea is a little better, and it's a little more clear. And now we're like, okay, this thing actually has wings. And then I ask for the buy-in from the team, like, are we all bought into this? What am I missing? Let's put holes in this thing before we actually take action.
Yeah, that's huge. Initially, everything is a good idea to me, and that's okay. Like at least I'm self-aware enough to know like everything in some senses could be a good idea too. But how
Right.
much time, how much resources, how much of my focus and attention? Yeah, I have a long-running parking lot that I'm excited about. I'm at the point now where I will put them in the parking lot. I'll think about it before I even bring it to the team to make sure that I'm solid. But
Yes.
that's a
Well,
great process.
yes. Well, and because it causes chaos for your people. And,
Yeah,
I didn't realize this early on, but, uh, and I'm sure I still do it, but hopefully I do it a lot less. I believe I do it a lot less. And like you said, being self-aware, but you bring it to the team and they're all of a sudden like, oh, we're doing this, not like
yeah,
it's an idea.
yeah,
And so it can cause a lot of chaos for your people. And the other thing I'll mention on the growing and scaling a business piece too, which was, you know, my year for 2024 was focus, and my word for 25 is lead, and then earthship, leadership. And I have seen a just insane hockey stick growth in all of our companies by in the last 90, 120 days, from just identifying and creating this space for leaders where they understand what their job is, they understand, they have more ownership of that, and they have an understanding of what the outcome is that they want, and saying like, hey, let me help clear a path to run. How can we help clear a path of bring me the gnarliest problems, because
yeah,
how can we create those things that lay the groundwork that you have a path to run.
yeah. You very subtly pointed out something that I fortunately learned a handful of years ago, and I would say the vast majority of people I have on the show and people that I hang out and talk to do what you just said. You said my word, my focus, my goal is what I heard for 2024 was the word focus, and
Mm-hmm.
you said 2025 is going to be leadership.
Mm-hmm.
For years now, I have chosen one primary goal for the year, and that's it. Because if I completely focus in on that, then incrementally year over year, I've seen massive growth. Daily journaling for years back, but I remember around 10 years ago, I was like, I'm not a very good manager. So this year, I'm just going to focus on being a good manager, which I knew was not a skill that would be a primary skill for me in the long run. But as we talked earlier on, like I can't lead my management team if I don't know how to manage,
Yep.
so I focus on management one year. I focus on financial intelligence as my only goal for one of my early years after I realized I had none. And then year over year, I pick one thing to work on. And it's counterculture to you can 10x your business in a year and all that crap that isn't real for most people. But the reality is like by choosing that approach, I've on average grown over 20% year over year for like 12 or 13 years now.
Which is a monster number. And when you think
Yeah,
about the extrapolation of 20% of 20% of 20%, like
it's
that's
ridiculous.
a ridiculous number. And the other thing that you made me think about was leadership within the business. But the other component that I have had just this renaissance with in my own business, my own life, is a personal brand. And if you're not working on your personal brand, you're not clear on who you are, what you stand for. So I just came up with this, the last month or two or three, I don't know exactly, but what are the pillars that you stand for? So like if you go on my social, I'm about leadership. I have, a lending company. I hang out with my family a lot. I do crazy stuff outdoors and hunting and hiking and whatever. I love to read and I love to write. And you think about anybody where you can have a clear understanding of who they are, what they do, what they're about, and then how do I connect with that person? So man, I am obsessed about this right now.
Yeah, and personal brand is a huge part of business success these days. It's a key factor in growing the business in different stages, and then as the business takes on its own life and grows without your personal brand, it's still important because just like you said, this is the we've had a couple other calls about other business ideas or other things, um, but pretty short like calls exploring things that we were looking at. But the reason I have you on today on the show is because of exactly what you said. You clearly communicate who you are and what you're up to and what kind of person you are. And it's obviously clear and authentic. And so It opens up the opportunity for me to share you with my audience. It opens up more business opportunities, and like we're only going to work with people in the long run that we truly align with and relate to. And if you can't communicate who you are as the CEO, as the leader, as the founder of your company, effectively yourself, then you miss out on a lot of opportunities, and you damage your own culture in the business, because our teams obviously watch and pay attention to all this stuff and see how we show up and what decisions we make and how we communicate, how we treat people, what we do with our family. Like there's infinite exponential impact from what you just said.
in either direction. Yeah,
Yes.
and it's hard to tell your team, like, whether it's on the marketing, on the for our individual agents, like, hey, post on social media. Here's how you do it. Oh, by the way, and I was looking at my Facebook today. I have this on airplane mode, so I don't know if it'll show up, but I looked at this, and we had like 150% increase in engagement over the last um, like 28 days on Facebook.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I remember I have a good friend named Matt Larson who's been really impactful for me on the writing and the copywriting and how he structures things a lot. And he's amazing. And everybody should go follow him because he's incredible at it. And he's a go-giver and a stud business operator. And I remember him showing me like his engagement, and I was like, dude, that's never going to happen. Like, I don't know how you did that, or what wizardry you did, or the shadow ban or whatever nonsense. Which I do think there are people who get shadow banned, but I think
Right.
for 99.99999%, it's because your content sucks.
Yes.
And there's no purpose to it, and there's no thought behind it, and you didn't define your pillars and what they are and what you're communicating. So all that to say, I go look at my team and I'm like, hey, look at this. You think I'm just asking you to do something? No, I'm doing it. And you know what? It's making a monster impact. Monster impact.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And what the amazing thing, a couple amazing pieces of that is, one, if we take time to learn how to write, and copywriting is a great skill to pick up, whether or not you ever use it, even publish it in some senses, which I think everybody should, but
Mm-hmm.
whether or not you ever do it commercially or get paid for copywriting, which only a few people will actually, that's a segment that you can totally be an entrepreneur and be a copywriter. But if setting aside all the dollars that you could earn, if you take the time to learn how to write, you're actually teaching yourself how to think.
Yes.
And if we improve our thinking, man, that's exponential benefits. And to be able to communicate in writing is so powerful and so cathartic and self therapy, right?
It is. It's the self-awareness. But I will actually go one step further than what you said is I am paid very well as a copywriter.
True. Yeah, I
Very
really.
well. And we will do multiple seven figures in multiple eight figures in multiple businesses because of that skill. I had this realization, like, CEO means I'm a chief copywriter too. Like, I
Yeah.
know, and if you aren't amazing at it or you don't love it, then you better be working with somebody to get better at it and to communicate your thoughts and communicate the things that you are about. And obviously, well, at some point, would I love to have a copywriter in my business? 100%. Do I like writing? Yes, I love to write, and
Yeah.
it's made a massive impact. There's another guy to follow. His name is John Cheplack, and he has like 26,000 followers on Facebook, and I don't know what he has on Instagram, but that dude is a stud copywriter. And if you're not good at this, go watch Gabe's post. Go read his, read mine, read Matt's, read John's. Look at the people who are successfully actually doing it. They're actually doing it. They're actually translating. And every single day, you better believe I have multiple people on our team whose job is to help us on the social side,
Yep.
whether it's DMs, whether it's conversations. And actually, you and I had one. Like, there was something that landed weird, and I was
Yep.
like, boom, done. Like, we changed that immediately
Yeah.
because it's a little scary when you start to build these systems out and they don't always work, and that's okay. We tweak it and fix it and go back after it.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll say about social, which is perfectly aligned with the rest of the conversation here, is that you're always going to see, like, here's the amazing social media strategy, or here's the three things to do to make your $1 million on social, or whatever people are going to tell you. If you can ignore that and realize that it's your consistency over time that will build an incredibly huge snowball effect, that's where all the money comes from. And so I do agree with you, and I'll correct myself in the future. that I do get paid to copyright a lot, even though I haven't been technically paid for that myself personally. My team does a ton of that now, a lot because by writing, by showing up consistently, you incrementally build the picture of who you are and who your company is. And we teach this to all our clients. An amazing example of that is I have a longtime client that joined one of our memberships about a year and a half ago. My team and I coached him. We said, keep showing up on LinkedIn. That's where your audience is. Like, you're putting out the right content. We coached him. We helped him with his copywriting. We went through a lot of iterations. He told me 3 or 4 months ago when we got on a call, he's like, I hated this stuff for a while, but I trust Gabe. I'm going to do it. And then he went to an event and landed like a $250,000 contract from somebody that had never met him before, but said, I see you all the time on LinkedIn. I need to talk to you about my problem right now. Like, the person like demanded that, in a good way, that he work with them. So you realize like consistency over time builds the brand of who he is. He's a great guy, amazing entrepreneur, and he's in the early stages of his business. But just by dedicating, sticking with it day in, day out, eventually the dam will break, but you don't know when that's going to happen. So you can't give up when it's hard or when you're tired of it or when you think nobody is seeing it. You definitely need to improve your skill and follow people and learn copywriting and like keep going. But also there's just a factor of like, just outlive your competitors is the fastest way to win, is what I tell people.
It is. And like you said, the consistency. And I tell you what, we have 3 full-time VAs who help us. And I never call them VAs either, that they're
Right.
virtual team members, but they're critical. And I tell them all the time how amazing they are. And so there's a shout out to Jay, Josh, and Heidi. They're fantastic. But, you have to have that machine running. You
Yeah.
have to have it. And, when you think about like, well, I'm not good on camera. Well, practice. I'm not good at writing. Well, write every day. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know what to write. Well, guess what? Here's a little $1 million nugget. Instead of we used to have a whole giant spreadsheet of all these concepts to talk about. And, I would always feel not that comfortable walking into a video, recording now. So for everybody, I have this really expensive fancy thing called a notepad, and twice a week I write down 8, 10, 12 ideas of the things that, what did I work on this week, what was the challenge, what did we have to figure out, what kind of conversations, what impact, what did a mastermind do, what did we do in the lending company. And so they're all still things around the pillars that I want to talk about that impact for my business or whatever, but then it's on my mind right now.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's way more fun to talk about because now it's the stuff you're like, well, yeah, I'm actually working on this right now. And it's not that hard.
Yeah, you're totally right. And then you're not feeling like you're manufacturing something, because that's how we all start. And I always tell people, go back and find my old videos. They sucked, but I just
Mm.
sucked long enough that I stopped sucking somewhere in the middle, or I
Yeah,
don't know when. And the other thing with writing content or posting videos that I've reminded myself of and gotten back into, because I'm working on a longer form book right now that I think will come out next year,
nice.
is I just go into the Facebook groups that have young entrepreneurs and, real and claiming to be business owners. And I can read through 3 or 4 posts and immediately be triggered in a good way of like, man, they could really use this advice. Then I
Make a
write
video.
something that would be helpful, make a video about it, or something that really irritates me. I'm going to remind people that's not the way to do it. Like, this is the way I know because I've done it hundreds or thousands of times. So yeah, real world content inspiration is so much better than buying content prompts or pretending that using AI is going to put anything out there that somebody cares about. The energy that we put into our content is what makes it work. You can't outsource the energy or the intention. You can get all the support you need. You can use the tools, but you can't fake it. AI drives me crazy right now, the way that people are using it. It's an amazing tool. But
It is
people go,
amazing.
drop these prompts in and you'll have all this content. And everybody will know it's garbage content, and you will tank anything you were doing if you were doing anything right.
And let me tell you, we've actually A/B tested AI prompts. So I write 99% of my stuff, and the other, our team will come and take something out of a podcast or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I didn't technically write it, but you can tell
Yeah.
it does not perform the same way. It doesn't sound just like you. It doesn't have that intention. I like the word you use, the energetic, like into the world piece. That's a real thing, man.
I always remind people, like, we all know, for you and I, or your significant other, your wife, your partner, we all know when we get the okay response to a message and everything is okay and they're happy, or when we get the okay and we're like, oh man, something's off, or
That
I
did
screwed
not
up
land.
or made a mistake. And the characters didn't change. It's the energy behind it. And we can tell that because like, that's the energetics of communication, which is why books and writing and content we put out there is so powerful, especially when you spend the time to put a book out, because that will ideally outlive us, right? It should be
Well,
valuable
for the
beyond us.
free for the free post there. So yes, and actually, as a matter of fact, I'm proud to say I'm an actual published author. It's with a real publishing company, and writing. It's funny. People say like I'm not a writer. Well, I love writing, and it's called the No Quitters Guide. But actually, Gabe, I wrote the book. I hired a coach, which of course I did. Hired a coach. I wrote the book in like a very short period of time, like 19, 20 days. And I play piano. I'm a very fast typer or whatever, and I'm obsessed also. So I'll sit there and write for hours on end. Well, I went back and read the book, and I hated it. And so I talked to my coach about it. Like a month goes by, and I end up rewriting the entire book. So 77,000 words the first time, 56,000 words the second time, or 72, 56,000. Blank page, rewrote the entire thing, and so yeah, I'm staring at it now and I'm like, yeah, that was a giant pain in the ass. But you learn a lot about yourself when you have to actually work through the writing and doing it. And I just want to say one more thing about the content thing since we're talking about
Yeah.
it. Because I want people when they listen to this, like, dude, if you do this, it works. All right. I know it works. And like I said, we'll do multiple eight figures and make multiple seven figures because of it. And so, well, what do I post? Here you go. Write it down. You're going to write copy without a picture. You're going to write copy with a picture. You're going to write copy with a video, short. And what is the first line of that copy written post? What's the first line of your video? Think about it. And then you can do a live video. You can do a real type of post. And then the other thing that I've started doing is we actually make content where we take like, what did I do this weekend with my kids? We went to Glow Wild at the zoo. I take some video and I throw a reel together and I just put it up. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, here's cool stuff you can do. And so go write those things down. And now you can say, okay, cool. Well, I can write a written post. I can write and I can create a video. Now you have two pieces of content in one day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, it's just about putting that structure and routine in and doing a little bit of prep work and then holding yourself to be accountable to it, knowing that the content game is like a very long sales cycle. I always tell people if you don't have the sales you want today, then look back 30, 60, 90 days. Those are typical sales cycles depending what industry you're in. And you can go back, and if you weren't, investing in the right activities back then that's why you don't have sales today. With content, I look in 6, 12, 18-month timelines. And like if your content isn't performing today, then look back 6 months, and were you being consistent back then, or did you have a big gap? Because every time you have a big gap, you restart the cycle. And people
Yep.
can't trust you to be consistent, to show up with something inspirational and helpful and that will guide them. It's simple to do, and it's about the consistent daily discipline of doing it for sure.
Mm-hmm. The simple, not easy. And then, I will say, I mean, having a couple of people to help is really incredible. But we've only had them for a year,
Yeah.
or a little over a year on our team, and so you can start with something, and it feels really daunting. Well, now you have the habit of doing that, and then you can bring on somebody to help me create now 2, 3, 4 videos, and and you don't have to have a fancy production team. Let me, guess what? This is an iPhone. This is my son. You know what? This phone has an incredible video camera on it. It has incredible audio. I used to use, all the fancy like microphone and stuff. Guess what?
Yeah.
I just put it's literally sits right here. This is my computer. I set my phone on it. I record 30 second to 60 second videos and send them to the team.
Yeah.
That's it. You can put it in Opus. You can put it in CapCut. You can put it in YouTube or Facebook, and it'll add the captions for yourself. So there's
Yeah.
no excuse.
Yeah, the tech is so much easier than years ago for sure. And if you're willing to suck for long enough, like you said, then eventually you have the opportunity to be successful, but you cannot be successful if you don't suck for a while.
It's no question.
Well, a couple things. One, hold it up, but what's the name of your book again? Hold it up and tell people where they can find it.
Yeah, of course. It's called the No Quitters Guide to Investing, to Crushing Real Estate, Investing, and Building an Extraordinary Life. And my good buddy Brandon Turner, who's the former co-host of Bigger Pockets, and now has a giant podcast of himself. He wrote the foreword, which was really cool. And by the way, that guy, if you search Brandon Turner, he has like six or seven of the top real estate books on Amazon. Nuts. And you can buy that book anywhere books are sold. So, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, whatever. And yeah, this is pretty cool. Thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, absolutely. I bought a copy when it came out. I didn't connect the name when I bought it, but I followed them for years. That's amazing. You guys got to do that together.
Yeah, it was
And
awesome.
and last question for you, being a father like I am, if you had to sum up key few principles for your son, if he ever catches this someday, which I know my son does not always listen to my podcast, and he always gives me good critical feedback when he does this
Nice.
now. But for your son and for future generations, what do you think are the key things for the entrepreneurial journey that are important to remember?
Well, I love this question. And you'll think that people who are listening will think this was like a teed up softball toss. So we did not have this conversation. I did not know this
Yeah.
was coming, but my son has a YouTube channel and it's called Dab Crafty, DABCRAFTY. And he loves to play Fortnite and he's actually insanely good at it. I said, cool, you want to play video games? Then you're not going to sit in front of this and just watch YouTube videos. You're not going to just sit in front of this and play Fortnite. So you're going to make an impact for people. And we're going to teach business principles now. And so we started him a YouTube channel. He has his own branding. He has his own channel. He's already had almost 40,000 views on his YouTube. He had like 70% growth this last month in his subscribers. And we laid out his pillars, just like we talk about what he talks about, what he doesn't talk about, the people he plays with. And guess what? He's almost 14, and 10 days from now, he will have a business that actually produces real revenue in the next 12 months on his YouTube channel. By the time he's 17, 18, he'll make more money than most adults make from his YouTube. And so I challenged him and I said, are you a consumer or are you a creator? And what value are you actually bringing? And so my son's name is Colin. He and I talk about this on a regular basis. We look at his data and metrics on YouTube. We talk about his videos. We talk about his engagement. We talk about writing and commenting and all this stuff. So like all the things we just talked about, Colin and I have this conversation on a weekly, if not, daily, every other day basis.
Yeah. I love what you just said because I subscribe to your son's channel to support him. I've watched a couple things and I shared it with my son. But
Love
when you posted about that, it's been whatever you said, 6 months, a year ago. The thing that stuck with me that I have used since then and will use the rest of my life and with my son and with everybody I talk to is, are you a creator or a consumer is the way I remember it.
it.
If you're not creating something new as an entrepreneur or creating value, and creating something new should be inside of your business, not distracting yourself with creating too many things, to be clear. But
Yeah.
if you're not creating value on a daily basis, then you need to reevaluate and check on what you're doing. Because, yeah, creators become wealthy, consumers stay poor. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just reality. And what amazing advice. I appreciate that, Nathan.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if people, you can check him out on Dabcrafty on YouTube. And also people, for us, we try to make it really simple. Nathan Brooks, REI for Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, it's all the same. So I encourage people who are listening, like Gabe, this is an awesome conversation. I'm a part of the conversation, but I mean, it's real world, actual gold.
Yeah.
And the things that you and I have talked about come from real pain, real experience, real money making, real desire, real action. And how many people are afraid to just take the freaking action and go do the thing and then reevaluate what worked, what didn't work, and do it again, do it again. Just don't quit.
Yep.
Outlast your competition.
That was a lesson I learned 15, 20 years ago from Russell Simmons. He was on an Inc.com interview. And I know since then he's had some controversy come up around him and stuff like that, which is not the point of the story. But when I heard that, somebody said, well, how have you been so successful with all these brands? I mean, the guy's a mogul. He has so much success under his belt and worked with the greatest of the greats. And he's like, well, simple. He's like, we just outlasted our competitors. And I'll never forget when he said that. I was like, oh, I can do that. I don't have to be smart. I just have to be hardworking. And like eventually the smarts will come. And so, yeah, I would
Yeah.
agree with that, Nathan. Just encourage everybody, keep going, keep working at it, keep living through your failures and learning from them, and keep figuring out how to create more than everybody else from a value standpoint. Truly know what your audience, what your customers value, and everything else will work out if you stick with it. So
100%.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on, Nathan. We'll definitely have you back in the future to see how things are progressing. But I really appreciate your time and just appreciate your leadership in the entrepreneurial space. You're somebody I admire and look up to, and you're fighting the good fight. So thank you.
Oh man, your words mean a lot to me, brother, and I know you are doing the same. And this conversation has been a great joy for me, and so I look forward to the podcast 2.0.
Awesome.